We're here today with John Doerr from Rain Group. And John, with your several decades of experience in sales training and consulting, not to date you or put numbers on it, but certainly you've been at the leading edge of sales learning for so long. I'd love to learn from you. How have you seen what sales reps need to learn evolve over time? And maybe what are some specifics of what we need to be letting go of now? It just doesn't work anymore.
Well, absolutely. First of all, thank you very much for having me be a part of this.
Absolutely.
One of the things we've seen over the years, and not to give everybody a sales history of the evolution of sales, but if you think back of just a couple of years ago, everybody figured, well, some form of consultative selling was the most important thing. And you go in and you would ask prospects, what keeps you up at night? Which, by the way, is a terrible question. That's the essence of what people were asking. So it's diagnosing what's going on with the prospect and then matching it up with solutions. And for many of us, for many years, it became more than just a methodology. It became a mindset. That's what I go in. I have to ask questions. I have to ask questions. And what you have to realize is prior to that, which is not that long ago, but it is in the greater thing, but not that long ago, people were selling features and benefits. So they went from selling features and benefits to selling the solution and being able to ask questions. And what evolved, and we look at 2008 and the Great Recession as sort of the watershed mark where everything switched. It didn't really switch then, but it just seemed to come to focus, was that buyers started to become more cautious. There were more buyers involved in the process. The buyers were more educated because they could go online. Remember, the salesperson was necessary before because I can't find things out. I call you up and you send me brochure. That's not enough, so I needed to talk to the salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can go online and find everything that's available. So the buyers had more information. So what has happened in the last few years, and I think that what buyers have to now embrace is that they are a big part of the value that people are buying. That they have to come armed with a new idea or a new insight about what that buyer is looking at.
Okay.
The buyer knows a lot, but they're looking for something different. And the classic for me is actually had a client say this to them when they walked into the office, and they were all set to do their typical consultative selling approach, and the prospect said, "All right, don't ask me what's keeping me up at night." Oh. And they said, "Tell me what I should be worried about that should keep me up at night that I
There
don't."
you go.
And
So
I think
that in and of itself is a big switch, and I would say that what you've set up is an opportunity for a sales rep to be what somebody buys, whether
right.
they're willing to step up to that.
Well, and that is stepping up to it because there is a lot. You have to know the client, you have to know the industry, you have to know what's going on before you show up. And just like the prospect knows more about you,
Mm-hmm.
there's no excuse that you can't know more about them now.
Mm-hmm.
You have the same access to them. So there's an expectation there. So I want to stress something, though. The consultative selling approach hasn't gone away. There's still a time and a place for that. But what we've seen is that through our research that people who win more often come prepared with something new to bring to the table. And
Okay.
that's a huge difference. So we have to leave behind the thought that our products and services are what we're selling. We have to bring to the table that we're bringing something of value that somebody's buying.
Okay. And to quote a very good book, I would say that you're insight selling more
Thank
these
you.
days than going in and playing consultant and doing your diagnosing in the sales call. You're really bringing the insights with you. Is that fair?
You are bringing the insights with you. And the other point, remember we talked about questioning, and questioning still comes into play,
Mm-hmm.
but the types of questions might be more illuminating, forcing them to think in a different way, pushing them a little bit out of their comfort zone
Mm-hmm.
so that people have that aha moment. And the other thing is you're not just diagnosing the need, you have to truly understand the need. So one of the things we also found while providing new ideas and insights and collaborating are the two most important things according to buyers when we did our research. Number four was understanding my needs.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding is not just saying, oh, you have this need. It's connecting it to what they need to know, connecting their need to what's going on in the industry, what's going on in the marketplace.
Okay.
You have to become a student of the world now. And business acumen, where it was always important for the best salespeople, becomes essential.
Okay. So, when you instruct sales reps to get them more savvy in an insight selling process, for example, how has their week changed as far as how they'll allocate their time to really be of greatest service to their prospects and their customers?
I think they have to, number one, spend more time in preparation. Now, good salespeople always prepared well.
Right.
If you don't have a plan, Stay in the Car was the name of a book. When I was a publisher, I had an author, Mac Hannon, who wrote this book. I loved the title of the book. It didn't sell very well, but I still loved it. If you don't have a plan, stay in the car. So salespeople have to have a plan, but now it has to be very particular during the week. What do they have to spend time on? Read the Wall Street Journal. Read the local business journal. Every big city has the Boston Business Journal, the Houston Business Journal. Read what's going on. Understand what's happening with your client.
Mm-hmm.
They're a publicly traded company. Read what the CEO has said about their next initiatives. You should not be showing up saying, so what's the most important thing you're working on these days? You have to know it. So they have to allocate more time in that preparation to really be of value to the prospect in the conversation. And I think, one of the things that's important to recognize, while insight selling has been the buzzword, and I know with our book we added to that buzz,
Yeah.
and we love it because it's been great. People come to us all the time. But we stress with people that it's not the silver bullet that suddenly this is what has to be done. It's just realizing that the best of the best salespeople, I think, have done it intuitively for years.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's not enough to leave it to the best of the best because the bar has been raised and everybody has to be really doing this now.
Okay. So, John, in your opinion, are sales professionals then just expected to cram more into their week, or has something gone away that isn't as important anymore? And if so, what is that?
I think, the time is the big thing. If you ask salespeople what's their biggest challenge, it's time. And I think that what they have to evaluate faster, what they have to be better at, is number one, recognizing when an opportunity is a real opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Salespeople chase too many things, so
Okay.
they have to give up. They have to be more diligent in their recognition of what's a real opportunity. But I think the other thing is they have to concentrate on those opportunities where they can make a difference.
Okay.
Make a difference. So where do they find time? They become more effective in their conversations, so they win more often, and they don't lose to no decision.
Oh,
And then I have to also find out when to stop pursuing something.
okay.
And this is not a new thing, but it's a thing that we see a lot with our clients is you've heard the expression happy ears. I'm sure you've been doing this for a while. And salespeople come back from a call and they say, it was fantastic.
Human nature. Yeah. They love me.
They love me. And then you ask the very basic question, so what happens next? And the salesperson said, well, they're going to call me, maybe. They said they would. So they have to really start paying attention to being willing to ask the question that says, if we were to pursue this, if we go ahead, is this something that would truly be of interest? Because remember, the prospects, they may not be lying. I wouldn't put that on them, but they want, most of them want to be nice people. They don't want to tell you to their face that, no, you're wasting your time. So I think one of the things that salespeople really have to work on is quit chasing the things that aren't going to happen.
Okay. You bring up such an excellent point because we can't do that level of due diligence and be an insightful thought leader for everybody that we may have prospected before. So we really do have to be more selective on the front end. And by doing that, we have a smaller pipeline of higher quality opportunities. So I can see how that radically shifts how somebody uses their selling time.
Well, the other thing related to that is that if you think of just not about being an insight seller, there are certain people who are insight buyers. And if you think about what is the challenge that every salesperson has said all the time, I got to get to the decision maker, I got to get to the person who holds the purse strings, I got to get to the person who can make things happen. The reason they couldn't in the past, and the reason they don't always time, is they don't have something of value to offer to those people. And so they have to decide if they're selling to the inside buyer, the buyer who can hear something different, who can recognize the strategic importance of it, and then say, yeah, I want that, as opposed to wasting their time with the person who just checks the box and said, no, 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 just give me your best price. And so if you're going to sell with insight, you have to sell to people who will buy with insight as well.
Okay.
Not everybody.
Okay. So, John, how do you recommend that a sales professional today make sure that they stay relevant and that their own approach is current with the times?
I think it doesn't just apply to salespeople. It applies to all of us. Somebody said to me recently that everything that I know today will be obsolete in 12 months, it seems. And it used to be a whole generation before that kind of transition would happen. And we've heard it time and time again, but you can't forget that salespeople, like everybody, have to be lifelong learners.
Right.
So every salesperson, no matter how long they've been doing it, can find a new way to say something, a new way to do things, a new approach, and they have to be also extremely relevant to their buyers.
Okay.
A lot of the clients I work with, you'll hear what's their biggest fear, that the marketplace has shifted, that there's changes, that there's mergers there. So you have to be anticipating. That's a big challenge. That's hard to do. And sales is not an easy job without all that change. But I think they have to be leaving some time as a part of their job to learn more about the environment in which they sell. I think that becomes crucial. And I know it's a time issue, but think about it. If I spend all my time beating my head against the wall and I say, well, I've always done it, and things start to change and I'm not getting the same results, isn't it time to step back and say, what am I missing?
Mm-hmm.
So I have to be willing to learn all the time. Listen, I read all the authors that write in this space I want to read about because they have things to add.
Right.
You can learn nuggets, and if you can learn a nugget here and a nugget there, pretty soon you got a whole lot to bring to the bank.
Right. A bag full of gold nuggets, right?
Hey, that's right.
So to personalize it a bit, John, how do you keep yourself on the leading edge?
Well, I think a couple of things I said. The nice thing about doing what I do is I know the authors. I run into the authors. I am friends with some of the people who might be considered competitors of mine. And you read what they put out. I read other people's blogs. I read people like Andrew Sobel, Jill Conrath, or a couple of people I just find have that nugget that I'm always looking for, that say, that's a little bit different. I hadn't thought about it that way, or I had never done that type of thing. But I think the other way is you have to have a curiosity about the people you're talking to. So salespeople have an advantage. They're out in the world every day. And what they have to do is they have to learn to keep their ears open, which we've always said, right? Listen more than you speak, but listen for trends. Start to practice connecting things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the ways you do it. So every session I run, every client I work with, I feel like I always come away with a lot that I've learned from the client as well.
Right.
You got a bunch of people face to face with the marketplace every day. They have a lot to teach.
Right.
So I think salespeople sometimes say, well, I don't have any insights to bring. I said, you talk to people every day. What are you learning? Mm-hmm. So I think that's another way. They just have to open their ears to the things that they're hearing every day.
That's such a key point because they are getting to go inside so many different companies within the same industry. So if they take the time to digest and think about what patterns am I seeing, what am I hearing across all of these accounts, they have more insight than anyone in any one of those particular points that they've talked with.
And that's the thing. I think they forget that the people they sell to often have a reference point of a smaller environment than they do, but they're running across all that. If they just step back and took a moment to say, what are the trends that I'm seeing? What are the things that I'm seeing? Now, listen, I know a lot of salespeople out there saying, if I only had that luxury of 5 minutes of quiet time. But I think one of the other things I advise people is if it's important enough, you put it in your calendar like anything else and you make time for it. and it becomes a habit. And I think it's one of the habits that become more and more important, that reflective time.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be a lot each week. Just say, where am I today? What am I seeing? What is different around me? And then move forward.
That makes such great sense. Even to have a checklist for yourself to drive the reflection of, with all of the accounts that I met with this week, what am I hearing coming out, and how can that inform my sales for next week?
Absolutely. And one other thing you asked a little bit before, Mary, about the how do I stay on top of things? What do I do personally, and what can I pass along? The other thing is, don't be afraid to use your peers as coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Peer coaching. I'm always asking people, what could I do better? What did I miss? And I think in sales, because the measurement is so immediate, and it's the only job where everybody's measuring you every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have something.
Ad nauseum. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So how can I learn from other people? And I think sometimes you see people who just say, well, I got it. I know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just remember, what worked today won't necessarily work tomorrow. So just be open to what's possible.
Well, I like that message, because when I see the sharp talent coming out of some of the sales education programs these days that universities are kicking off, their skills are really well honed right out of the gate. So they're starting at a much higher level of capability than the days old where, you learned it on the streets. That was where you learned to be a sales professional.
Oh, right. If you go throw them in the deep end of the pool, and you said out of universities, so you had mentioned my decades of experience here. I forgive you for that. But there was no place in any business school when I got my master's.
Yeah.
There was nothing on sales.
Exactly.
Marketing. But now you see more and more places where they have sales as a part of what they want to include. And they recognize, if I'm going to teach these people about business, they create a great company, they're entrepreneurs. What's the first thing an entrepreneur has to do? Is figure out how to sell what they just developed. Mm-hmm. And so they realize that's a skill set that they're missing. So there is more and more of that you see. And I think that you see more and more companies, when they have learning academies, that they're now doing it for sales.
Exactly.
Make a huge difference.
Well, and the collegiate competitions are not for the faint-hearted. Those students really go through the rigors.
Absolutely do. And I think that the sophistication of what is produced in sales training, the expectations, the measurement. The measurement used to be the smile sheets. How did the training go? Mm-hmm. And what you see now is that, how do we know this works? So our win rate, our growth in our accounts, our reduction in our sales cycle, we want specific measurements so we know what can make a difference. And I love to work with clients who work like that, because now it's something that you can measure ourselves against. Can we make a difference for those sorts of things? And I think that is what's happening, and there's more and more refinement of that. I think that's fantastic that companies are doing that. I don't think they used to do it, and I know they didn't do it very much years ago.
Right. So hypothetically, John, if you were, say, a 50-something-year-old sales professional with a few decades of experience, and you wanted to make sure that you were current, what are, say, the top 2 or 3 things that you would do immediately to make sure that you're continuing to raise your game?
I would first of all find what's available for if it's an individual, not waiting for the company to do it.
Yeah.
I would say be current with the business in my area. So that's reading the business journals, whether it's the Wall Street Journal or the local. Depends what you're selling.
Right.
So if you look at the scope of where you're selling, that's the scope of what you're reading. And I think that, as much as honing your skills makes a difference, because now you're more relevant to the client, you're more relevant to the prospect. The other thing I would say is there's many online blogs and things like what you're producing right here. Mm-hmm. They're easily accessible now that weren't there. Technology has made it that you can have it fed to you as needed. Now we have 75 online lessons ourselves. Are they for everybody? No, but for the motivated person, yes, that's a way to do it. You don't have to wait for your company to do it. I think the last thing to realize is that at any stage in our career, not just for sales but for anything, you have to question your desire and commitment. Mm-hmm. because we could talk about change and talk about keeping motivated. Sales is always something that you have to keep going out and do battle on. And the one thing I would suggest to people is it's the way to, it's not just staying current, it's staying on point and on focus, is to re-examine what you're trying to accomplish. Goals are incredibly important. What we've seen is the top salespeople all have goals and all have plans to meet those goals. And at the bottom of the heap, very few of them have it. And is it the chicken or the egg thing? I don't know. But I've seen plenty of times when you can get people to suddenly realize, when people say to me, I know what to do, but I don't do it. And they say, then you have to ask yourself why. So I would say the first thing is establish what your goal is. Because all those things we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a 50 or so, or if I'm a 40 or 30-year-old salesperson who has to do this, what am I trying to accomplish? And what do I need to do? And once they can establish that, if they fit in constant education, and they ask themselves why I'm staying up a little bit to read this, or why I'm spending an hour to go through this, the answer is because I want to get to those goals. And that keeps them going all the time. Because it's very easy. Rejection is one of the things we face every day as salespeople.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't deal with that by knowing what you're trying to get to, it's very easy to stop. And you can't stop. Like a shark, if you're not moving forward, you're drowning. So you got to always be moving forward.
I like that. I'd have to say my great disappointment is when I talk with sales reps and I ask them, how do you use your travel time? How do you use your windshield time? And they'll say, oh, I listen to talk radio or I listen to the music stations. And I'm thinking, wow, there are so many great podcasts, or you could listen to YouTube videos, or, that is the opportunity. It's not taking any more time out of your day because you're sitting in the car anyway.
Well, excellent point, because there's still many sales reps who are in the car all day. And the difference between now and many years ago, there are so many available good, high-quality podcast types of things. Mm-hmm. And every car has Bluetooth. Every car, there's no reason. You download things onto your phone, you plug it in, and you listen. And one of the things we found, which is great for us, is that we make our stuff available in many formats, but the second most popular is downloading it to audio so people can listen to it in the car.
Right.
There are people taking advantage of it, and there's a lot of good stuff for people to take advantage of.
Yeah, you can constantly drip feed yourself with new insights. Yeah.
Yeah, and you just, the reason the focus on the goal, I think that what you have to need is you have to decide what's my market, what am I trying to focus on, because otherwise, I think sometimes people look at it and it's like, where do I begin?
Yeah.
Just get overwhelmed.
Right, and it's never enough. There's always something more you could go read. Yeah.
So you have to say, this is what I have to accomplish. Because this is one of the things you learn over the years. I've always, we all have keeping our to-do list and keeping our goals and keeping our things going forward. One person recently said to me, and this isn't new, but this is just a reminder, every night before he goes home, he writes down what he has to accomplish the next day. Mm-hmm. He looks at it in the morning, and at the end of the day, he looks at what he hasn't accomplished. Now, most of us would say, all right, we roll it over till the next day. But what he said, which I thought, for me at least, was an aha moment. He said, I asked myself, why didn't I do those things? And sometimes he discovers he's afraid. He doesn't feel like he has a skill set. Or he doesn't like it, and he has to figure out a why. I don't like it, do I have to do it? And so some things he puts off. He said, you know what, it wasn't important to me. I shouldn't have put it on the list. But some things, he says, I need to develop that skill. Oh. So it's a very good way to start to think, what aren't I doing for a reason? Very simple. Like I said, what do I have to do? What didn't I do at the end of the day? Why didn't I do it? And that last question, why didn't I do it, helps you figure out what should I be working on.
I like that. Actually, I'd like to emphasize that as our wrap-up point, because it's such a beautiful way to help people really hone in on what's going to advance them right now and a specific skill that they can go out and attain.
Absolutely. So we often talk about the skill and the will, and in sales, they're equally important. Mm-hmm. I can teach you a lot of things, but if you don't have the will to get better, it won't make a difference. And where does the will start? It starts with every individual salesperson. That's where it begins. And so you have to reprogram yourself to have that will, and then you'll take on the skills.
Beautiful. I love it. Well, John, I will continue to follow you as somebody that helps keep me on the leading edge. And I greatly appreciate your time and sharing your wisdom with our audience as well.
I enjoyed it immensely. Thank you for asking me.
Thanks so much.
Sales Mastery is your resource to make it easy to accelerate your sales learning. Make sure to connect. Find out about new interviews first by subscribing to our YouTube channel right here. And get more resources to help you master selling by clicking here. I wish you the best of success.